Hello and welcome to this rather large tutorial in creating a crowd with Makehuman and Blender. First we seek out Makehuman's low poly settings, next we randomise the colours and use some mathsy trickery to get around the fact that the object info node will only pick one random number per object. Each person will consist of one mesh and one armature. The meshes are all part of the group that we use in the particle system. As long as the meshes and armatures are in a visible layer, this is not a problem. Then we create some animation loops. First step is to use Makehuman to create ourselves a load of people. Makehuman, the amazing software where gender is a slider. So, the first thing we want to think of though is we're putting like maybe 10,000 people in this crowd, and so we don't want high quality realistic humans that are super high poly. We're looking at like maybe PlayStation 1 levels of poly count here. So first of all I'm going to go into geometry and go to topologies and click low poly, and these the male and female low polys here might be okay depending on how many people we've got, but we're actually going to go for the super low poly, the proxy, where he no longer has fingers, and it's down to 730 faces to create this person. Not much point in having a low poly skin if the eyes are high poly, so we'll set them to low poly as well. We also want to add a skeleton so that we can animate him, her, and we want the mocap one, which is the simplest and appears to be named in Welsh. But basically we don't need to animate fingers because he hasn't got fingers, and we don't need to animate the face because they're going to be really small. If we look at materials, interesting along the bottom here where they've put her in a suit, but more importantly she has eyebrows. Unfortunately most of the skin is covered with this, which, okay, I mean, we're not going to want naked people in here, but I don't think we all want them to be wearing wetsuits in this crowd. And what they are wearing, well, maybe they're going to have like bare arms or even bare legs, or even a bare midriff, bare chest if they're male. You get the general idea. Interestingly enough, young Caucasian male specimen texture is the same as this one. If we take, see the face is the same there. We want the eyebrows from this one and the hair, but we want the skin from this one. So later on we are actually going to combine those. And now we just want to generate a whole load of random people, and so we can use modeling randomize. Only I'm not actually sure if I want children in this crowd, so we can go back to main and bring up the age to, we'll have them like a teenager, and then files, to export an FBX file, and if I've exported 3 already, the last 3 we export, we want to use the 3 material maps we'll be using. So I'm going to export this one. I'm actually going to use the female specimen rather than the male one. The female specimen is the same as young Caucasian female 2. We don't really have to worry about which skin goes on which character here. So we go to Makehuman export. We've got these 6 FBX files, and we have these these 4 textures in them. The eyes, the skin of a woman in a wetsuit, the skin of a black man, and the skin of a white woman not in a wetsuit. So I'm going to open this in the Gimp, and it doesn't look any less disturbing in the Gimp than it did in the preview. I'm also going to drag this onto here, so we now have both of these on top of each other. And I'm going to add an alpha channel to the top layer, and I'm going to cut out this wetsuit, but I'm going to leave the hair, eyebrows and eye makeup on her. So I want the lasso tool. I'm going to click basically to create a I'm just working in straight lines here. I'm basically cutting out the wetsuit, but I don't have to be super exact about this. As long as I go more or less around the edges of it, it won't be a problem. And come to think of it, I can just do, as long as I cut out all of it, it's only that bit next to the head I have to worry about. So return, and that selects it, and then delete. And now we have a perfectly good skin for the white people. What we're going to call it, white skin. I mean, as we're actually dealing with tiny people, we could scale these down from 2048 pixels square to like about 512 pixels square. But I'm gonna work on this size now. We could decide to scale it down later. Next, I'm going to delete the bottom layer actually, and I'm going to load up. I'm going to drag this dark skin person into this, but that's the right way around. I thought that was going to come out on the top, but it came out on the bottom. So now what I want to transfer is basically the eyebrows. So I'm going to zoom in here and select again that. Select the top layer. Draw around the eyebrows like that, press return, and then I hold down Control and press I to invert the selection, and then I can press delete, and I delete everything apart from the eyebrows. I can then do a mode of, I don't want a mode of normal. If I go with a mode of darken only, that doesn't really work. Let's use multiply, which is okay, but it sort of puts this dark orange tint around them, which is not something we want. So if we now go to colours, we've still got the top layer selected, and go to curves, and I can drag the top edge of the curve up a bit. It seems to not be doing it. Right. We've currently got everything apart from the eyebrows selected. So if I press Control A to select all, that looks better. Colours, curves. That's starting to look good, but they do look very orange. So we're going to click OK, and then colours, hue, saturation, and we're going to turn the saturation down. Note we are only working on the eyebrows, not the general face. That looks okay. And we're going to save this as, export as black skin. Okay, so now we're in Blender, and we've got an environment set up, we're in cycles, and there's no cube. So the next thing to do is import an FBX file. And I'm going to start with number 4, randomly enough. So here he is, he's got a skeleton, and he's got a skin. First of all, I'm just going to go to the skeleton and set it to stick and X-ray. And now I'm going to select that again. If we go to rendered, we see this is what the person actually looks like. But okay, let's have a look at the node tree here. And there's a hell of a lot there. But I mean, we can start looking at it, and a fair bit of it can be deleted. I mean, this bump map is quite clearly doing nothing. This shader add, so what are we adding here? We've got a normal, it's coming from a normal map which just has a single colour going into it, so we can delete that, which means that this is a reflection map with a colour of white multiplied by black, so that will equal black. So that's a reflective map that's entirely black, so that's adding nothing to it, so we can delete that whole section. Here we have a specular map which has a colour of actually very, very, very dark grey multiplied by black, so that equals black, so it's a specular map of nothing, so we can delete that also, and then delete that. So now we have another, so we've now got an alpha, a transparent material mixed with a diffuse material. And how much of the transparency are we using? Well, it's white multiplied by white, so it's nothing. So we can delete this whole, so we can now delete this, this and this and connect this up. And the only thing we've actually got now, well, actually we can delete this as well. It's the colours multiplied by itself, so we can delete that one as well. And all we're left with is the image texture being a diffuse texture. But this isn't actually the image texture that we want. We created one just now in the Gimp, which is the one that we actually want. There we go. Weird folding problems on the arm, but basically all the characters are going to be viewed at about that size or smaller, so this is not something we need to worry about. So I'm just going to go into solid mode again, and let's call that white skin. And oh, I've got caps lock on. I'm not going to bother renaming that one though. Let's also have top for their top, their shirt, and trews for their trousers, and shoes for their shoes. I'm going to go into edit mode. Oh, and that happens. For some reason, this is a thing that happens, and it's bizarre. How do we fix that? Well, what we do, if I go here, go to object mode and go Alt R, rotate, and then I go into pose mode and go all, select all, and then Alt R, unrotate, and Alt G, ungrab, so that everything's gone to its original position. And now, yeah, we're happy, and we can go into edit mode and it's still in the correct position. Joy. So, top. I'm going to make top red, and I'm also going to go into settings and make this red. And I'm going to make trues is going to be blue. For now, we're going to set up a randomizer so it selects loads of random colours for these. But for now, I'm going to just select some rather dull colours for them so I can see what I'm doing in solid view. So, let's go to press 1 and 5. So, and I'm going to move the camera out of the way. Move to the second layer, M to move. And we can start editing this character. So in edit mode, A, unselect all, Control R. Oh, actually I do need to select all. A again to select all, Control R around the wrist, drag him to that, and then Alt S. And we get a bit of a cuff there. Bit of a cuff there. Now Shift Alt click, Shift Alt click. Now we can press Control plus, and top, assign. Now we're going to do the same for the trousers. And finally with the shoes. And we're going to now import all the other models and do variations on this. You know what I realise I haven't done is the eyeball do actually need to be combined with the appropriate mesh, because otherwise they're not part of the groups, are they? So I'm going to go into edit mode, into wide view mode, because then I can see them better. Select the eyeball, select the person, control J. This one we're just going to use circle select because we can't use the edge loops on this top. So I'm going to use circle select, select all the top, but I'm going to carefully avoid the really narrow edge polys. I'm still going to use Control Keypad Plus to select one more thing. This is what it does. And then Control Keypad minus does this. Really, really useful. So we now have a selection of people with different kinds of clothing, except all in the same colour. Brilliant. Well, now let's look at mixing up the materials a bit. So if we go to rendered here, they're all incredibly white. We don't have any racial variation or even like subtle skin tone variation amongst who's more sunburnt than others. And this is a sort of thing that we immediately want to fix. So I'm going to drag up this one and make it a node editor. And we'll right click to select one of these, and we'll go to the white skin. Now the first thing we can do, search object info, and this has a random thing coming out of it. So we can also add a colour RGB curves, and with hope that I'm not accused of blacking people up in this, if we bend this down, we can now, they look like a sort of, I don't know, a sort of South Asian look to them now, which is fine. And if we plug the random socket here into the factor here, then all of them are subtly different colours. So let's go B, box select around them, Alt D for duplicate along Y, holding Control down to gridlock it. And now if we go back to rendered view, well, they're all wearing the exact same colour shirt and trousers and shoes. Now we are a little bit more multiracial, they all seem to be wearing a uniform, which isn't what we actually want for this crowd. So I'm going to add that object info node again, and a colour ramp, and shift the random into there and the colour into there. And unfortunately, as you can see, the whiter the skin, the darker the shirt, and vice versa. I mean, it's going to become a little more obvious if I switch it around. Unfortunately, the object info node only picks one random number per object, and so we want to be able to have like the colour of the shirt be picked randomly independently of the colour of the skin. So there is a way around this. To demonstrate how we're going to set this up, I've set up 3 little gradients. They're all set up like this. So the thing is, right, if we think that the object info random node is picking a random line, a random vertical line somewhere in this, if we set this up into a whole series of little gradients, then it won't look like this random colour has anything to do with this random colour. So I guess we could use a colour ramp and split it all into sections, but it would be a bit of a faff, and we don't really want to do that. So instead, I'm going to do it using some maths nodes, 2 to be exact. And this one is modulo, which is actually the remainder. When one number is divided by another number, we end up with a remainder. So when this number, which is currently going to be a random number between 0 and 7, including all the decimal places in between that you can possibly imagine. Well, okay, you could probably imagine more decimal places, but you can't actually remember them, is then going to be divided by 1. The remainder comes out as, and it's split it into 7 little gradients. So, well, as you know, we're also going to pick up a random colour for the shoes and the trousers. So for this one, we can do something similar. Well, obviously we're not going to put another 7 in here though, because then we're going to get, they're all in line with each other. I mean, if we typed 14, then they'd all still kind of be in line with each other. And this is why we picked 7, which, as you all know, is a prime number. No matter how many we pick, if we always pick prime numbers to go in here, they will never be hugely in time with each other. So, let's get back to those people. So now if we add this in here, we don't want an add, we want a multiply. Where are you? Multiply by 7. And now there's no obvious correlation between the colour of somebody's skin and the colour of their shirt, which is what we're after. Though we do want a few more colours than like white to grey here. So let's make this a far more interesting gradient. And now we've got a whole selection of different colours of shirts, and we're going to do something very similar with the trousers and the shoes. On the shoes, however, we also want to mix in some glossy. Now you can see we have the alpha from the colour ramp affecting the glossiness colour. So the colours with a high alpha get to be more glossy. And at this point you may be asking, hold on, didn't we come up with a black person's skin earlier? And you'd be right, and we are going to attach it to some people. But first of all, there are some alterations we want to do on the rig, but we're changing the bone structure before the skin colour. That's how evolution works. Deal with it. So I'm going to go back into solid view. I'm going to go 7, keypad 7 for above view, box select, delete. So here are the people, and we're going to make some alterations to the rig. I'm going to show you it on this one, and then I'm going to do it on all the rest of them. So, selecting the rig, we go first to edit mode. Right click the points of the heel, extrude, E key for extrude, along the Y direction, so that's Y, and then point 3, which I type in. So we've created 2 extra feet. I'm going to name the first foot, which I go to the bone button here, IKL and the other one, I'm not going to set up a full IK rig because it will take a long time, but I am going to set up, I want to be able to move the hips without their feet moving from the floor, because that's kind of important for dancing. Now, it's very important to get this exactly the same on each person, because then we'll be able to use the same animations, albeit slightly altered, for all of them. Whereas if we get the names slightly wrong, then that's not going to happen. So we've created these two new bones called IKL and IKRR that slip out the back of the thing. We're also going to select this foot bone and shift right click, select this foot bone. We're going to untick inherit rotation. And we actually have to do that on each of them separately. And then these two, select these two again, and we go Alt P, clear parent. So now if we go to pose mode, we can select this leg, and we go here. I'm just going to drag this along a bit so I can see that the full name of the skeleton is that. Inverted Athletics, number 9. IKL, the chain length of 2 bones in the chain. So now we right click select this one, and we do pretty much the same. The exception being this is IKR. And don't forget that. Now hopefully we can move these and the foot remains pointing forward and the leg moves, but and this one as well. And if we move the hip bone, we're able to get, just by doing that, we're almost able to get down. Almost. So with that in mind, we're going to now start doing exactly the same to the next one. We can go over a few things that can go wrong. When we try to set up this inverse kinematics, that's what happens if you use the wrong skeleton name. This is meant to be 008. We need to set that. Hang on. Oh, I've turned it off and on the eye there. We're able to get it working and unworking again. If when you move the foot, if you can't move the foot, it's probably because this bone is still parented to the next one. Unfortunately, I have to go back to edit mode. Pose mode. If the whole person moves, that's because this is just a chain length of 0, and it needs to go up to a chain length of 2. And if the feet kind of rotate weirdly, we need to go to these bones and unclick inherit rotation. Okay, so now the skeleton's fixed. We're going to make some of the people black, and then we're going to teach them to dance. Let's go to front view with 1 on the keypad. Zoom out a bit. I'm going to make sure that all of the skeletons is in objects mode, because for some reason it seems to confuse it otherwise. Box select the lot of them. I'm going to zoom out until the grid is at that level. I'm going to use Shift Duplicate, Shift D that is, and this makes a duplicate that, like, now if I edit this guy is not going to change because it's a copy rather than an instance. Okay, so now these 5 people on the left, we're going to make them black. So I'm going to, I'm selecting them all. I'm going to drag that up a little way and make that the node editor. and I'm going to make this a rendered view. There they are. So as we go into materials, skin, I'm going to rename white skin. I want capitals on it though, that seems excessive. And I'm going to duplicate that material. And the duplicate material is called, of course, black skin. Right, so black skin, we prepared the black skin image. So I'm changing the current white skin image in. So let's go through that again. I'm on the black skin material. This image texture is white skin. Let's change it to black skin. And I'm now going to press Control with my mouse arrow noticeably in the 3D view. I'm going to press Control L, make links materials. So it's going to copy, so that basically all the selected people, which are these 5 people, are going to have the material settings of the foremost selected person, this person. So now they've all gone incredibly dark black, which is why, well, it started with the black skin, which is already quite dark, and the curves are randomly making it darker. So, well, we're going to aim that the other way. So now we have, like, you know, quite a nice range of skin tones between our people. I think the next thing we're going to do is to actually set up the particle system. So I'm going to turn this back into a timeline. And Shift C to center the cursor. I'm going to add a mesh, a plane, edit mode, scale 20. This is the dance floor. Zoom out. I'm going to put the dance floor there. Now, I don't know how much experience you have with particle systems. As you know, there is an option to make a group appear as each particle. However, what it normally does is it will select a random object from a group. This is generally the best way to do it. So you can have a group of trees and it would randomly select one of them, and it means that, say, if you've got about 5 different trees, it doesn't look too obviously like they're all repeating. Now, the unfortunate thing is each of these consists of a mesh and an armature. Now, there is an option in the group of use the whole group. So you could have, we could use one person, we could make the skeleton and the person part of the same group, and we select whole group, and it would repeat all of the group on each particle. Unfortunately, what you wanted to do is to select, we can't unfortunately select a random group from a list of groups. However, each of these meshes is just one mesh. So we can make a group of the meshes, which I'm actually going to do now, and have it select a random mesh. The question, of course, being, will they animate? And the answer is, they will animate as long as the original objects and their skeletons are on a visible layer. They don't have to be on camera, they just have to be on a visible layer. So they can be hanging out behind the camera, and that's fine. Having selected all the meshes, but none of the armatures, I'm going to press Ctrl G, group, and I'm going to pop that open, and the name of the group should be crowd. Now, let's set up that particle system. Well, the group name is crowd, and at the moment they're impossibly small. Let's set their size to 1. And they're currently all laying on their backs. If we tick rotation, they're all pointing the same way as these guys. That might be okay. You note I rotate this one, all those people have then moved. I mean, can we set some random rotation in this? Also, physics, none. Oh, no, we've not. Right, no. Newtonian. Have we got... Of physics none. They're all lying on their side and they're popping in and out. So let's have they appear on frame 1. They stop appearing on frame 1. Right, they're still all appearing on their side. What could we do about that? Also, we can have, as they're not actually moving, let's have a lifetime of 1 and let's tick died. So no matter how long the animation ends up being, they're still going to be there. It's just if we decide we want frame 0, we run into problems. But never mind. So now we've ticked that. Now if we untick rotation, now they're all kind of facing sideways. I mean, we can work with this. We could, if we want the camera to be viewing them, we can view them there. But now if we go into the rotation tab and tick it, and can use phase, we can rotate them on the spot like this. We can also use random because it's not necessarily all facing the same way. I mean, if this is like more of a dance floor, we can have the random up all the way and they're all sort of like facing each other. I'm getting serious Where's Wally vibes from this at the moment. We can also, next to size, we can have random size. I mean, people don't come in hugely varied sizes, but if we set this to like 0.2, we get a sort of a more realistic idea of a crowd with people coming in different sizes. Now, I think at this point, so I've set up an angle I like where they fill the screen, I'm going to set this to rendered. Yeah, I think that works. Let's have more of them. Let's go from 1000 up to 2000. And now we're actually going to start animating them. Now, so I'm going to go into solid view first of all, and I don't want to see all of those guys behind us as I animate this one. Actually, I'm going to start, I'm going to start animating with you. So I'm going to select you and your skeleton and move you to this layer here. Oh, and your eyes. Let's move their eyes also to this here. And this way I can animate you without seeing all the other things. So I'm going to press keypad point, and I'm going to select that and press keypad point, and that means the everything centers around her, and I'm in a little bit more control. So also I'm going to drag up also I'm going to drag in a dope sheet and set it to action editor and select the rig. Now I'm going to make a load of different actions, and I'm going to heads, bodies and legs separate it. Basically I'm going to animate the hips, the arms, the head and the feet separately. So on each of the people, I mean at the moment I think we've got 10 people. We might end up with like 20 different animation combinations. So that on each of them we can combine different movements together to get dance moves. And the first one is going to be the simplest, so new, and this one's going to go hip bob. I'm in capitals. I'm going to leave it that way. Now, the music that everybody's dancing to is going to be at 120 BPM, which means it's 2 beats a second, which means if we're running at 24 frames a second, each beat is 12 frames long. Actually, let's set this to 48, so that's 1 bar of 4/4 in 120 BPM. We could, if you want to use this same crowd setup later for other projects, you can always push and squash the actions to make it work to a different BPM. So, and what we're editing here is, let's go into pose mode. I'm also going to go into front view. This is going to be the simplest one. So this first one. So first of all, I'm going to move this hip sideways and down a bit, and I'm going to press I location. Let's go to frame 24. I can use the cursor keys for that. I, location, and let's go to frame 48. I, and in this view, I, location. So we've got 3 keyframes for there. Now we're going to frame 12. And I'm going to do it like on the sort of the mirror of the approximate mirror of that. And then on frame 36, again, approximate mirror. And then between these two, let's just sort of have it down. And I'm going to just duplicate that frame. So that's Shift D in here. Zoom in a bit here. So this is pretty much the so if we can press Alt A for animate, we have pretty much the simplest possible dance move. Note that the animation starts on frame 1, but the first keyframe is frame 0. This is deliberate. If we set the first one to frame 0, well, there's a bit of a pause there, and that's because the last frame, frame 48, and frame 0 are the same. Now, the easiest way I find to do it is to set these keyframes to the same, but you actually start on the second frame. I find this is the easiest way to set up a loop. So, right, that's with hip bob, but I'm going to duplicate that one now. So this one's going to be hip swing. In fact, just for a moment, I'm just going to go back to hip bob because I forgot to do this, and I'm going to press the F key, which means that even if I don't set this action onto one of the skeletons, it will not be lost from the scene. So now I go to hip swing. I'm going to press that now actually, and this one's going to be a bit like it, but, and as this is a repeat, I'm going to delete the second half of it. And rotating that around, and then I'm going to rotate that one. Let's rotate that. And so that one, that one, that one, that one, and that one, location and rotation. And we duplicate this to the end. And this one now is going to be like the reverse of that previous one. And I'm doing my old rule of just doing this by eye. Just because that way, I mean, there probably is a way I could like mathematically reverse the position of everything. But the question is, would that actually make it a better animation? Or am I best doing this by eye? Let's just duplicate that over. It's a bit weird and knocky-deed, but I kind of like that. I'm going to duplicate this to hip swing 2. Hip swing 2, what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete the second half of that first of all. And I'm going to select that and scale that. No, I've moved to the frame 0 and press S2 to scale it, so it's now half speed, which is not actually what I'm doing. And I've duplicated that. Okay, I think that will do for hip animations. So now I'm going to create a new one, and I'm going to call this one, see, yeah, let's go back to that one and hit that F button, cut to the new one, and this one's going to be called Nod 1. And we'll press that straight away, and I'm going to press A, delete, and I'm going to press A until everything's selected, Alt G for grab, Alt R for rotate. So now we're going back to the default pose, and I want to see this one from the side. So where were we? Nod 1, brilliant. Now one thing I'm not going to do here is I'm not going to put the in-between keyframe exactly in the middle. I'm going to put it like towards the end of the gap. There's an animation principle that all movements sort of start at the hip and move towards the extremities. Few neat tricks like this one. This guy here, I've created a new action called static, which is basically the original pose keyframed on every bone, and this is useful for mixing with other ones. Like this one here, I've got the hip swing. I mean, if I turn this one off, you'll realize what it's doing. The hip swing just seems to be too much a lot of the time, but if I put static on and I have animated influence set to 0.8, and you have to keyframe this, otherwise it doesn't work. Even though I'm not actually animating it, I'm leaving it on 0.8. So that means it's doing the hip swing, and then it's 0.8ing, and then it's doing 0.8 of the static animation, which is the original pose over the top, and that means that I'm able to get a lesser hip swing. This has become very useful, but it makes me realise I want a few more hip swings that are more simple. So I'm going to go and animate that now. I'm going to do it. You. We've gone down the line and we've come to you now. So let's go to pose mode, and we've got the action editor open here. New hip swing minor. Now this one, this is a problem. Why I think I might need to move you to another layer now. So on this one, we're just going to have this one for first frame, just moving over a little way like that. Maybe rotating there so that our head remains in about the same place. Location rotation, and another of those on frame 48 at the end. Halfway down, we're doing the reverse of this. And then on this one, I'm going to this angle for this. We're just going to rotate that left that way a bit. And then on this one, the other way. So that's a nice sort of fluid. I think I might move those to much later. Yeah, that's a nice sort of subtle but alive hip movement we've got there. Now I'm going to go back, move you back to object mode, Move you back to there. And where is this person? I'm going to select this, which means we only see the selected objects in this view. Makes it simpler. So that's hip swing minor. And what can we combine that with? What arms? Arms 2. What's that do? Oh, that's a very nice one. That's nice over there, liking that. You can also have, for some reason I have to put the first action on here, so we'll go for hip swing minor again and press that to make it that, and we're also going to add nod 3. We need some arms. Let's make this double speed, this one, so I can set scale to 0.5 and repeat to 2. Now he's just doing his arms at double speed. Might even try more than that.
Okay, I've finished off by finally setting up some lights that flash on and off. I've used surface lights, which seem to be the fastest in cycles, and I've used red, green and blue. The red channel also has 30% of the green and the blue channel there, just as the rest do the same way, and they flash on and off, and that makes a cloud.